I'm Stephen Bader. I'm the Executive Director of the East Bay Economic Development Alliance, or East Bay EDA, and want to welcome all of you to the 2025 Economic Outlook and Annual Membership Meeting. We're very excited to have this event here today in San Ramon, and want to thank the City of San Ramon, as well as our breakfast host, John Muir Health, and our presenting sponsor, Bank of America. To help us get things going, in fact, along those lines, I'm going to call up in just a moment our John Muir spokesperson. Sharon Cassata Jenkins is on our board and has done some great work for us. She could not be here today. And so to welcome us from John Muir, we have Paul San, who's the Director of Primary and Pediatric Medicine and Operations here with John Muir Health. And I saw, here he is. So come on up, Paul. Welcome.
Good morning, everyone. Glad to be here today. My name is Paul Son. I am the Director of Primary Care Operations at John Muir Health. And I manage all our facilities in the South Counties. I'm filling in for Sharon Jenkins this morning. She's on a well-deserved PTO today. And I know I got big shoes to fill, so please bear with me. Sharon sends our regrets and hopes that you enjoy the delicious breakfast today. So please enjoy. So John Muir Health is a proud member of East Bay Economic Development Alliance for over 15 years. As a local, not-for-profit, independent healthcare provider, we recognize that many of our patients access our care provided through their employer benefits. As one of Contra Costa County's largest employer, John Muir Health participates in organizations like East Bay EDA because we know the importance of our economic vitality, not only for businesses in our community, but also for John Muir Health. So thank you, East Bay EDA, for all you do. This morning, I'd like to give you a brief update on our new San Ramon Outpatient Care Center that's located on 12677 Acosta Boulevard in San Ramon, which is just literally just down the street from here. We are leasing 52,000 square feet at Bishop Ranch 15 and have invested $30 million into this new space, which is close proximity to our partner, San Ramon Regional Medical Center. It's literally right across the street from there. We are expanding our primary and specialty care presence in San Ramon to meet the growing healthcare needs of this area's population. Our goal is to provide high quality, affordable, and coordinated care in a modern healing environment. Patients have access to primary and specialty care providers, imaging, lab services, and urgent care, all under one roof. Our new outpatient care center is now open and seeing patients. If you have any questions, please see me. I'm at the table over here, or please visit our John Muir Health table just up in the front. So thank you again for having me, and Sharon sends her greetings as well. And please enjoy the rest of the presentation. Now I have the pleasure of introducing our first speaker, who probably needs no introduction at all. She's our fourth term supervisor and also the chair of East Bay EDA. So please welcome Candace Anderson.
Thank you so much, Paul. And we are, those of us who live in South County, who are John Muir patients, are really excited about what has happened over at Bishop Ranch 15 with the expansion of our medical care. So as was mentioned, I am Candace Anderson. I happen to be the chair of the Contra Costa County Board of Supervisors. I have the privilege of representing this end of Contra Costa County, the Loma Linda area, the San Ramon Valley area, and a little bit of Walnut Creek as well. But more importantly, today, I'm here in my capacity as the chair of East Bay Economic Development Alliance, also known as East Bay EDA, and we are truly glad that all of you are here today for our annual Economic Outlook and Membership Meeting. Delighted that you joined us this morning to learn more about what is happening in our region and beyond in what we politely term uncertain times. A lot is going on. East Bay EDA is an organization that was founded 3 decades ago when a diverse network of regional leaders came together to really work collaboratively to address economic development concerns that impact the East Bay region. And since the organization's founding, East Bay EDA has evolved into a cross-sector regional economic development organization that includes many different stakeholder groups: business, education, government, labor, local government, philanthropy, research organizations, and others. East Bay EDA brings together key organizations and stakeholders at events such as today's 2025 Economic Outlook in order to help our businesses, our community, government leaders such as myself and many others in the room to learn, share ideas, and tackle shared priorities that so many of us have in the East Bay. We have legislative platforms that guide our legislative advocacy and policy work, and we're taking steps this year to increase our presence and support key issues at the regional and the state level, where it is so important that our voices be heard. We're particularly focused on advocating for investments and policies that will help East Bay businesses and communities be more resilient and thrive during these uncertain times. We have tours of important regional assets like our national labs, the Port of Richmond, as well as some of the many innovative companies that exist here in the East Bay. We also do something that not every city is able to do, not every county is able to do, but we have some economic analysis that takes place, research on key issues and trends that may impact the East Bay economy, as well as provide a range of informational resources, including things like our business resources map. Today's Economic Outlook event also serves East Bay EDA's annual membership meeting. We do this once a year where we have an opportunity to come together as colleagues, as friends, as innovators, people working on the same issues. I want to point out that East Bay EDA, of course, is only as effective and successful as the network of members, partners, and other stakeholders who stand with us as we tackle these regional economic development strategies and the issues that come with them. The logos that are going to appear on the slide are just a small sample, here they are, of the many businesses, community and public sector organizations that do invest in our work to move the needle on shared regional priorities. Along those lines, I want those of you in the audience who serve on the East Bay EDA Board of Directors or on any of the East Bay EDA committees, please stand so we can recognize you. We appreciate so much your leadership, your work in these various areas. As you can see, we have a wide variety, diversity of businesses, communities, elected leaders who will help to continue to carry out East Bay EDA's critical mission. So now that we've just called out some of the many people who are involved and support East Bay EDA's work, we also want to especially thank the many members whose logos do appear on the slide that are investing, sponsoring East Bay EDA above and beyond their baseline investment as members of our organization. So for those of you in the audience who are not members of East Bay EDA, today is your day. I encourage you to become a member of our network. And for those of you who are already members, we thank you so much for your support, for your membership, and encourage your companies and organizations to look at how you might increase your investment in the work that we have ahead. Last fall, we announced that East Bay EDA launched a data dashboard on our website, eastbayeda.org. This tool has a variety of demographic, economic, and labor market indicators about our region, which can also be disaggregated at the county and city levels, providing you with lots of great information at a glance about key economic indicators. So for the people in the room who like data, I am one of them, we hope that you can use this tool and give us the feedback about what you like, what else you want to see. So spend some time if you have a moment, not while we're talking, not today at the moment, later when you get back to the office, but see what information is helpful for you, what information you would like to see in a different manner, different way that we could produce it for you. We want to be here as a resource, a tool to you. East Bay EDA really has two websites. The main website, the eastbayeda.org, houses information about our current activities, events, regional resources, research, special projects, and more. But we also have our Resilient East Bay website, which also holds a lot of information about the East Bay manufacturing sector, including an interactive map of East Bay businesses, profiles of priority industry sectors, toolkits for local planning and zoning, and a resource directory and a regional events calendar. So I encourage you to spend time on both of those sites. Make sure to check them out and then sign up if you're not already receiving East Bay EDA's newsletter. You should, because we do highlight a lot of great events taking place with EDA and reference many of these resources already mentioned. So speaking of events, East Bay EDA does have several events that will be happening during the balance of this year and into 2026. And one that I do want to highlight is our East Bay Global Forum, which is highlighted up here on the screen. And East Bay EDA has had a long history of doing work around the international trade and investment, going back to its inception and the connections that we have had with the Port of Oakland. And our last international event took place right before the pandemic. So we're very excited to be going back to putting on these international events, focusing on partnerships and investment, something that is very, very important right now. This event is going to take place on the afternoon of Thursday, September 11th in Berkeley. And we also would like to thank longstanding East Bay EDA member Bank of America for being our title sponsor for today's annual membership meeting, and to Southwest Airlines for being our event gift sponsor. As most of you know, at these events, we often have prizes at the end, and you must be present to win. Two lucky attendees today will win 2 round-trip tickets anywhere Southwest Airlines flies in the United States. But again, you must be present to win when we announce the winners this morning. But here to say a few words and to introduce today's keynote speaker is Daniel Schulman, who is a Senior Vice President of Business Banking and Market Executive for the Bay Area Market for Bank of America. So welcome, Daniel. Thank you.
Thanks so much. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for spending time with us today. And thanks to East Bay EDA for putting on this great event. Again, Daniel Schulman. I run the business banking group for Bank of America here in the East Bay, and I'm also a proud member of the East Bay EDA Board of Directors. Having grown up here in the East Bay, I still live here in the East Bay. I've worked for Bank of America for 30 years. It's been very meaningful to be a part of helping the businesses, the communities here in the East Bay where I grew up and live. And Bank of America has been entrenched in this region as well for almost 120 years. We have about 3,000 employees here in the Bay helping support our local economy. And my comments today will be brief. Our commitment to the East Bay economy continues to be to volunteer locally, to provide grants and matching gifts through our employees to the organizations that need it most, and to provide lending and advice to businesses, small and large, to promote their growth and the overall health of our East Bay region. So thanks once more to East Bay EDA for bringing this group together today, for the collaboration and for allowing Bank of America to be one of the sponsors. But today I am very excited to hear from our keynote speakers, and along those lines, I'd like to introduce Abby Snee. Abby is Deputy Secretary for Workforce Strategy at the California Labor and Workforce Development Agency. She's worked to increase economic mobility for immigrants and refugees, to create a new healthcare workforce initiative in partnership with the California Health and Human Service Agency, to expand apprenticeships in California, and to develop training and workforce opportunities through the state's climate strategies. Her accomplishments are many, including serving as CEO of Jewish Vocational Service in San Francisco for over 35 years. She recently completed an 11-year term on the board of directors of the National Skills Coalition, and she currently serves on the PPIC Economic Policy Center Advisory Council. Did I get that right? Please come on up, Abby.
Thank you, Daniel. Thank you, Stephen, for inviting me here. Thanks to all of you for being here. And I will echo the thanks to B of A and John Muir for sponsoring today's event. In my many years at JVS, both B of A and John Muir were really amazing partners in terms of creating training partnerships and hiring opportunities for the people in our communities we all care about. I'm so thrilled to be here with you today and eager to hear from Alexander Quinn and get his perspective on the East Bay economy, and also pleased to share with you some perspectives on the economic, demographic, and public policy factors affecting the state's workforce and how the labor agency is responding, always with a lens on equity and shared prosperity. The administration has a clear imperative and focus on improving the lives of California's workers, learners, families, and communities across education, workforce, and economic development, reflected in the release this year of the Jobs First Economic Blueprint and the Master Plan for Career Education. The labor agency, that arm of the administration that does a few things. We protect workers from injuries and abuse on the job. We provide benefits to workers during times of transition and support training to build skills for workers and talent pipelines for businesses. We serve a core implementation engine for all of these policies, serve as a core implementation engine for all of these policy initiatives through a strategy that focuses on specific industry sectors, supports target populations, and drives workforce and education systems change. Overall, and I'm sure we'll hear much more in a few minutes, we're looking at uncertain economic trends and changing demographics that are shaping California's workforce of today and into tomorrow. Can we go to the next slide? Yeah. The Public Policy Institute of California, and you may have seen some of this recently released research, has identified shifts in demographics that result in a declining share of workers within California's population. This decline is almost entirely due to the aging of the population and also birth rates, which have been steadily declining for decades. The shrinking of the working age population, however, has been mitigated by immigration, although that's highly in question right now, along with steady increases of women in the labor force and the trend of older workers working longer. And since the pandemic, and I think a good thing is the expansion of remote work, especially in the ways in which it has enabled more people with disabilities to participate in the labor force. Remote work has really been a boon. An aging population foretells a smaller workforce, even as needs grow for certain services, such as healthcare, and creates opportunities for people who've historically been left behind, for them to build new skills and compete more effectively for jobs, especially with the promising and still being tested growth of skills-based hiring. And I'm hoping your companies are experimenting with skills-based hiring tools. And this is hiring based on skills, on the actual ability to get the job done, instead of relying on four-year degrees as proxies for certain levels of skill and cognitive ability. You can see in this somewhat dizzying slide that we're navigating multiple trends and macroeconomic pressures, as well as shifts in the federal and state policy environments and profound changes in technology, with the rapid sophistication and escalation of AI, where once again, California is in the lead both in development and in implementation. We just talked about some changes in demographic trends. Specific industry sectors are facing current and looming shortages. Healthcare probably faces the biggest challenges with the dual needs of increased needs among an aging population and an aging workforce of healthcare workers, all exacerbated by restrictions in immigration. Construction also faces similar pressures. Already funded federal infrastructure projects face worker shortages, complicated and exacerbated by workers also needed to rebuild LA after the fires, prepare for the Olympics and World Cup in LA, as well as the dire needs for housing up and down the state. We'll hear more from Alexander Quinn in a few minutes, but in an unsteady economic environment, we see threats from federal trade policies, multiple inflationary pressures, and supply chain backups. Both the Jobs First and the Career Education Master Plans propose policy solutions to address these trends and create opportunities for creating jobs, building skills, and most importantly, getting people who've historically been left behind into good jobs. So the master plan for career education, released in April, aims to prepare all learners for the workforce of tomorrow by guiding California in its effort to strengthen career pathways, prioritize hands-on learning and real-life skills, and advance access and affordability through streamlined collaboration and partnership so that all Californians can navigate towards career and family-sustaining jobs. The plan calls for breaking down silos and leveraging resources at the state and regional levels through a new statewide coordinating council and new systems and incentives for aligning regional boundaries and strengthening coordination at the regional level among workforce, higher education, and economic development players. The plan calls for strategies to even the playing field for people who have faced challenges to education and employment through expanding credit for prior learning. This is a really exciting and I think transformative concept, offering college credit for training and skills people may have learned in the military, in apprenticeship, or on the job. Credit for prior learning accelerates learning and completion so that people can move more quickly to attaining credentials and then getting jobs. We're also very excited about the proposed Career Passport, which will be an online tool eventually available to all students and workers that will show validated certificates and skills to ease hiring, especially the skills-based hiring I just mentioned. And again, looking at skills-based hiring as a tool to get people into jobs where they may have been restricted before. So the Jobs First Economic Blueprint was released earlier this year, and it has been a $400 million investment. And I know that East Bay EDA has been integrally involved in the region here. But through Jobs First, the state created 13 regional collaboratives across California to develop their own regional economic plans, rolled up into an economic blueprint which identifies the strategic sectors and strategies that best position the state to help create, attract, and increase access to good-paying jobs. The blueprint identifies sectors to strengthen, where California already has an established competitive position or significant employment, but where there are opportunities for growth in both employment and wages. The blueprint also identifies sectors to accelerate, including those with moderate to high projected growth that are ready for expansion, where additional investments, such as capital or infrastructure, could bend the curve to generate growth, including the sectors of aerospace and life sciences. And then the BET sectors include emerging sectors with significant investment or high strategic importance to the innovation ecosystem, including AI and carbon capture and management. However, it's those anchor sectors really supporting everything else that probably offer the most opportunity for people with gaps in skills or other barriers that have kept them from successful employment. And these are healthcare, public sector roles, and new roles in infrastructure. So that at the labor agency, our strategy really focuses on the intersections of sector, target populations, and systems change. And as I mentioned, we see healthcare, infrastructure, and public sector, notably education, public education, offering access into well-paying and stable jobs for the populations who, from an equity perspective, are most important to us. And these include opportunity youth and young adults ranging from 16 to 30 who have been and are disconnected from both school and work, may have backgrounds in the justice system and the foster care systems. We care deeply about immigrants and refugees and have been investing in and continue to invest in accelerated learning that integrates English language instruction into vocational skills training to really move people faster into credentials and work. Have very strong interest and commitments to the state's farm workers and have invested in strategies that help farm workers build their skills for more advanced roles in agriculture, including agricultural management, supervision, irrigation management, and very, very concerned and committed to dislocated workers. We're proud of innovative partnerships with labor and community groups, particularly here in Contra Costa County, to support the laid-off oil and gas workers as refineries have been closing. We're driving systems changes to leverage resources and deepen partnerships, especially with the community colleges, to expand apprenticeships into new sectors and new tools for measuring outcomes, including the state's longitudinal data system, Cradle to Career, when just this year, Cradle to Career will be, I love the use of this verb, ingesting workforce data. It kind of suggests some monster that's going to be just sucking in all this data. And we can move on. And we are currently leading partnerships and systems change in the implementation of the master plan and the Jobs First economic blueprint, and working closely with the colleges and other state entities to innovate with new technologies, including Cradle to Career and the Career Passport. We're excited about new concepts that we will be developing in regional coordination that will include new approaches and greater coordination around employer engagement, braided funding, and creating no wrong door approaches for different segments of our population, especially opportunity youth. In LA, we're about to launch a pilot that will feature opportunity youth and look at pathways into healthcare and identify where those stumbling blocks and roadblocks are in those pathways and support the organizations there and new approaches that can move young people past those roadblocks into jobs. As Daniel mentioned, we've been working for the past 3 years now with Health and Human Services, with the colleges on a broad range of partnerships in healthcare with 3 primary goals: to really help fill the pipeline of desperately needed roles within healthcare, to create diversity in the healthcare workforce so that we have people working in healthcare who really reflect the culture, the language, the life experience of the patients they will serve, and to provide good pathways into jobs in healthcare. We've been really, I'll tell you a few short examples. We've been really excited to build on the success of Alameda County's EMS Corps program. This is a program some of you may be familiar with that was founded directly by the county health services to meet a dire need for emergency medical technicians and has really pulled young people primarily who've had experience with the justice system in a very intensive 6-month program that get them into credentials with pass rates higher than the national average, and into jobs as emergency medical technicians. Through the state's Workforce for a Healthy California initiative, we've been able to we're just starting really to replicate that program in 11 sites around the state, including a new site here in Contra Costa County, that over the next 2 years should train over 600 EMTs we desperately need across the state to respond to all kinds of emergency situations, including new and emerging roles in mental health crises, as the state's 311 system has opened up. As I mentioned, working with the colleges on accelerated pathways for English language learners, and just about to launch 3 pilots across the states for wellness coach apprenticeships. This is a new occupation that will fill the needs directly in our schools, with the contracting agencies, with our education partners, to really meet the very serious behavioral health needs among our children and teenagers. And these are roles that will require either an AA degree or a 4-year degree and require clinical experience. This is a new occupation in the state, and we see apprenticeship as the gold standard in workforce training, where people can earn while they are learning. And so we want to, from the beginning of this occupation, insert apprenticeship in the training model so that people can get their clinical experience and get paid for it at the same time and really move faster. So just in closing, as I'm sure we'll keep talking about today, this is an uncertain time, and we have a new federal administration, which is already having an impact and a projected impact and concerns in our work. We are seeing some increased unemployment around the layoffs of federal workers in the state, which then creates pressures on the state unemployment system. We have uncertainty around tariffs and global trade. Every week, part of my job is looking at the state's WARN notices, those notices on projected layoffs. And we're already seeing increasing numbers of layoffs in transportation, in warehousing, and shipping, manufacturing, and retail, that are likely to continue. We're concerned about the state of the federal budget and the impact that will likely have on all the resources we need to deliver on these workforce and training programs, as well as the lack of clear policy direction on workforce development across the country. We're extremely concerned about threats to Medicaid in our state, both in terms of the safety net supports that we rely on through our partners at the state and county level, as well as the impact of these cuts on the state's healthcare workforce. The UC Berkeley Labor Center recently issued a report that shows that we could be facing layoffs of close to 140,000 healthcare workers throughout the state through the projected cuts. Also concerned about possible work requirements for benefits programs, which both discourage access, restrict access, and increase administrative burden. And already starting to work with the Health and Human Service Agency on how our workforce system can be a partner in kind of easing that burden for as many people as possible. So let me close and thank you all again for the opportunity to be here to share some perspectives, and really looking forward to Alexander Quinn's comments, which I think will inform us all. So thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Deputy Secretary Snee. That was a fantastic way to help anchor some of our upcoming comments. We are going to have Deputy Secretary Snee and our keynote, Alexander Quinn, in a little while up here for a fireside chat with some Q&A. But before we continue, just a couple of other things. I wanted to thank the City of San Ramon. I know the Deputy City Manager, Scott Cole, is here. San Ramon really helped us make sure we had this space at no cost, so thank you for that. And I want to also give a quick shout out to our staff, because we have a wonderful staff team. Just because he's right in front of me, Xian Ballesteros, Patience Fodu, Jackie Funasaki, and just back today with us again, Carlene Au. And Nina Steen is not here today, but thank you for all of them and all the great support. I'm now going to call up our East Bay DA's Vice Chair, Ed Del Beccaro, to introduce our keynote speaker, Alexander Quinn, and continue with the program.
Hi, everyone. It is my very good pleasure to welcome back Alexander Quinn. Alexander Quinn is the Senior Director of Research for Northern California for JLL, and he specializes in doing economic research and commercial reports for the country. Prior to JLL, he was an economic consultant and testified before U.S. Congress. His other major claim to fame, he is a professor at that other school, Cal Berkeley, where he teaches economic analysis. And he is known for his insightful analysis of economic trends, and he tells a compelling story of how they relate to us. Alexander.
Thanks, Ed. It's funny being here because I've only been on the outside. I generally go for my daughter's soccer games, which are over there. So I always wonder what's on the inside of this building, so now I know. It's interesting. And then also I just realized today is the day of anniversary of the state Supreme Court rejecting or allowing same-sex marriage. So wonderful thing. So anyway, I just wanted to go over a little bit of what's happened in the economy. A lot has changed since the last time I was here a year ago. I always start with something a little bit of Homerism. I'm an Oakland kid, so I have to start there first. And of course, we lost last night. We expected that to happen, but it was sad nonetheless. And I think a lot of people, me begrudgingly as an Oakland A's fan, Oakland Raiders fan, an Oakland Warriors fan, feeling deeply annoyed that there is you can't support a professional sports team in Oakland. That's BS. If you look at the numbers, total cultural leisure services spending in the East Bay, this is Alameda and Contra Costa County, it's around $8.5 billion, which is more than the state of Alabama or Nevada or Oregon. It's about the same as Connecticut. It's slightly below Minnesota. And if you include Stockton in that, in our numbers, so if you include Stockton and Vallejo or Solano County, then we're at around $12.4 billion in terms of culture and leisure spending. I also, I know that Alabama does not have a professional sports team, but it does have a professional sports team, otherwise known as Alabama. And so does, UConn. So just keep that in mind. Anyway, I just thought that's an important point to make, is that yes, we can support a professional sports team in the East Bay. So let's start off with just, what's happened over the last year. A lot of crazy things. We talk about uncertainty. I think we all knew that some of this was in fact going to happen. We just didn't know it was going to happen at this level. So this is the uncertainty index. Believe it or not, we have what's called the U.S. Trade Policy Uncertainty Index, and it is off the charts. It's never been this high. Economists love measuring lots of things, and we measure things and we go, wow, that's really high. It's at 8,000, it's never been that high. We think it's gonna come down, but it's still, and probably we have a group track in JLL amongst all the economists. And the joke is that the Trump administration is messing with economists because there's no way that this makes any sense. And it seems that way at the moment, that it's just like this up and down craziness. So right now it's at 8,000. And this is just what's happening on a monthly basis. And we have to literally change every one of our decks over and over and over again based on what's happening. And you probably heard, of course, that China has a 90-day reprieve, 30%. So this is what's, we know it was going to be somewhere around, I think it was 135%, I believe, tariff on China. All of these countries were going to get 10%. If you look at it in general, what you would say is the US was in norm with most Western nations as it's relatively low tariffs, which is normal. Now we were going more towards countries like Argentina, Brazil. Those are countries that have relatively high tariffs. So that's unusual because we're a relatively advanced nation. We don't, typically advanced nations don't have those high of tariffs. So we were going in that direction. And so now we're at 10%, 90-day reprieve. And, you know, it's 30% for 90 days, is what we said. But, you know, just keep calm. We think that it's going to be okay. I think a lot of this is hot air. We don't know precisely what's going to happen. And we do see this as a negotiating lever. But it does, chaos is not good for business. We know this. So it does have impacts. And there are things related to investment that are being put on hold because we don't know what the new normal is. And that's the impact of all of this. So one thing to think about is where is this going to manifest itself? So GDP as a share of trade. This is what this is. This is just looking at the trade by percentage. You can see basically that Texas is the place where, in fact, you see the highest share of impact. So some of the red states are, in fact, more meaningfully impacted by tariffs than you know, some of the blue states like California. So that's 16%. So it does seem that it might get some loud voices from some of the red senators that you would not suspect that they may otherwise have thought. And then the other thing I was just, this is a punchline. I wanted to ask you, how long does a trade agreement normally take? I guess. 2 years. 4 years. That's a good guess. They're all really good. Yeah. So actually, yeah, it's roughly around 5 years. So the point is, usually takes about 18 months on average, and then another 45 months to implement. So why do I say that? Is that you see these tariffs come in, it's not that they're immediately resolved. The pain will continue. It's not going to be immediate unless, again, this is we don't really know because of the reality of this administration is very different from historic norms. But if you look at the history would tell you, well, this takes a while. So we would expect this to take a lot longer. This is Torsten Slok. I don't know if you know who this person is. It's Apollo Global Chart of the Week, or Chart of the Day, actually. Sends this out. You can subscribe to this person for free. I love this person. This person's great. If you just, all you have to do is look them up, and you can get these emails. I recommend subscribing. Little bite-sized candy of economics. And so what it means in terms of what we're looking at in terms of the federal funds rate, these are forecasts in the federal funds rate, is that we forecast the federal fund rate to go down. And this is a really tricky situation. You can see that pressure happening with, you know, Trump's tweets associated with, oh, Powell's not being aggressive enough in reducing rates. But really what's happening at the moment is there's an expectation of lower demand, right? And recessionary impacts associated with tariffs. And what does that mean? You want to reduce rates. Well, also you have tariffs. And what do tariffs do? They increase costs. So that's stagflation. Those two things really run in counter to one another. However, current forecasts generally assume that rates will fall. So right now, as of 4th of April, there's an expectation that rates are going to be reduced. So that's good for the 10-year treasury, or generally for if you're doing loans. The expectation is that things are going to come down. But there's a guy named, I don't know if you know who Scott Galloway is. He's a podcaster. But beyond that, he's like a person who just talks about the 10-year treasury is the adult in the room. It does not bow down to anyone. It is just a realist. And the realist is basically saying that there's a higher risk of the US government and deficits, and we assume that risk in our 10-year treasury, which means that it's going to be elevated at a higher rate. The cost of real estate will be higher, the cost of your mortgage will be higher. So that's what's showing up in our numbers. Basically, the 10-year treasury is staying higher because of that underlying associated risk. So it's in that number way at the edge there. So what does that mean for pricing? It means pricing for offices go down. Pricing for industrial goes down because the cost of lending goes up. And these were our forecasts in February. So this is by country. You can see that USA was somewhere around 2% in terms of our GDP forecast. So we are still forecasting positive. And we don't really know, but we're discounting it by roughly around 200 basis points, so essentially flat in terms of GDP growth. You're likely aware that because of net imports, we saw GDP was negative last quarter. But we're kind of basically thinking it's going to be flat based on the new numbers. But we don't know. And I would tell you that I forecasted a recession in 2023, and it did not happen. So our best forecasts are always imperfect. In general, we think that India is going to be generally better, and China will generally be better. But overall, we think the entire globe is going to be lower in terms of GDP growth. So we did arrows this time. This is what we're doing. We're just doing arrows because we can't really forecast numbers anymore. So what did we say? We said all bad, not good. So GDP down, consumer spending down, inflation up, interest rates down, because that's positive, and unemployment up. Generally what we're saying. And the same for Canada and Mexico. So that's where we are at a national level. Okay, so that's the bunnies and flowers news. Now I'm going to go to Bay Area economics, or go to Bay Area economic update. So let's just start on kind of what's happening on the whiplash reality. So if you look at publicly traded companies in the Bay Area, they're actually doing quite well. We're near our peak. We're at around $17.6 trillion in terms of market cap for Bay Area companies that are based here. So quite strong. Some of those are NVIDIA and others. NVIDIA is now the most valuable company in the Bay Area, not Apple. Followed only behind by Microsoft. And generally, we're doing pretty well. And the other thing I always want to bring up, because I know you have to manage this, is companies that have left the Bay Area have underperformed the companies that have stayed in the Bay Area. So if you look at market cap and you look at Q1 of 2021 of the companies that left, like Tesla, like Charles Schwab, I have a list there, CrowdStrike, Digital Realty Trust, they've gone up about 71%. The ones that have stayed are up 81%. And that kind of varies month to month, day to day. The reason that that went up recently is as Tesla's had a bit of a jump in Coinbase, which officially moved out of the Bay Area. They've seen a bit of a jump lately. But still, the Bay Area's publicly traded companies are outperforming those that have left. The other one is, if you want to look at unemployment in the area is still relatively healthy, 4.1%. East Bay, that's combined Alameda and Contra Costa County, 4.3%. Our historic average is around 4.9% for the East Bay, so relatively low, relatively strong. If you look at employment growth, East Bay better than San Francisco overall. So if you look at it, we're above our pre-pandemic peak. So we're at 2.4 million. And we were at around 2.38 million prior to pandemic. If San Francisco is essentially flat. So it just shows that, you think that, oh, San Francisco might be recovering faster. No, that's not the case. And this kind of shows it in, if you anchor it based on 2019 numbers. So if you take 2019, express that as 1, and then you just look at a percent change. The US overall has outperformed California, then it goes Northern California, then the East Bay, then the Bay Area, in that order. So actually, the East Bay has outperformed the Bay Area in terms of employment growth, mostly because of medical government jobs, not in the professional services sector. And here's some other stats that we use on a day-to-day basis, probably use for the dashboard as well. It's just looking at bridge toll traffic to get an idea of, okay, well, what's the day-to-day activity and what does that mean in terms of actual commute behavior? That's a really good sign of economic activity. And the Antioch Bridge is back to what it was in 2019. What's going on the Antioch Bridge? Is it just because it's newer, I guess? The Bay Bridge is about 8% below. It's actually pretty good. However, BART, 42%. So that's no bueno. There definitely needs to be an increase in the amount of transit and commuter. Commuter behavior has remained exceptionally low. And we still need that number to increase. If you look at the downtown San Francisco, like Montgomery and Embarcadero, it's been growing at around 10% per year, but it's growing very slow. AC Transit's around 76%. But here's another thing. I said that we would see population growth within the East Bay this year. Guess what? We saw population growth this year. That wasn't a big bet, but it was give you an idea. It's all international migration really driving, actually all the state of California saw that. We saw international migration continue to boost population growth in our region, including in the East Bay, roughly 58,000 people. And we saw that across all major markets in the Bay Area, so San Francisco, Santa Clara, and Alameda and Contra Costa County. And even we corrected upwards for 2023, so both positive in 2023 and 2024. So that is positive. Also, you'll notice that brown represents domestic outmigration, and that did not nearly increase. It fell off. In other words, we didn't see as much outmigration as we had in the previous years, which is a good sign. VC investment is through the roof in the Bay Area, and it's really driven by a single investment. So it's hard for me to talk about this. If you look at it, it looks kind of crazy town right now. It's $50 billion. So global is $122 billion. Or if you look at the US, it's $90 billion. So that's roughly, what is that, 60? So that's more than 60%. I'm doing this in my head. Do you know why? Anybody? 40 billion of that is OpenAI. So it's one company. It's a massive amount of injection from SoftBank into one company. So it's hard. It's like a statistical anomaly in a sense. But even if you take that out, if you took the Bay Area's 16 billion, so you subtract out the 40 billion from OpenAI, and you just assign the 16 billion, well, that's more than Europe. That's how much the Bay Area is receiving. It's by far the highest concentration. It's really driven by this AI sector. And this is just what it looks like in terms of market share. If you look at it in terms of percent of US investment, it's roughly 63% of all US investment is going to the Bay Area, driven by this AI sector. I think the problem that we're all facing is, oh, that means more people are being hired. No, I think a lot of this is going now to compute costs. It's going to cloud costs. It's not going necessarily to people. So that's a little bit on the overall economy. Now I'm going to go a little bit on the office side. And the office is we're still trying to figure out the new normal. San Francisco at an all-time high at 35.4%. We'll see that number start to fall in Q3 and Q4 of this year. Downtown Oakland, 30.5%. That will continue to rise based on expected vacancies that we already know. I'll go a little bit into the what we call the East Bay suburbs in a moment here. Overall, though, you'll notice all of the markets across the U.S. saw vacancy increase. So this is the shift. This isn't a shift, as I've talked before, about a change in office employment. We're not in a recession. What we're seeing is a change in behavior. Just like you bought your stuff online, we're also seeing people work in their pajamas, and the result is just a shift in behavior. But it's really driven by a segment of the cubicle land. Have you seen the movie Being John Malkovich, where they're like in the half floors? Those type of buildings are not doing well. In other words, low quality buildings are really not. This is the 1980s buildings. This is Nakatomi Plaza. Do you remember this movie? Nakatomi Plaza. Okay. The 1980s buildings, not doing well. No bueno. Those are the ones that are really sucking wind right now. If they're not going refashion or being highly amenitized, those are the ones that are having all-time highs in terms of vacancy. Whereas if you are a building built within the last 15 years, in fact, your vacancy is relatively low. We're seeing rents amongst those higher quality assets of over $100 a square foot. So very, very different dynamic amongst the highest quality assets. So in the suburbs, hard for you to read, but what I would tell you is the vacancy is quite high across all of the markets. We generally think of the East Bay suburbs as what's called a spillover market. And as a spillover markets, they've generally seen their vacancy, anywhere from 20 to 38%, depending on where you are. Concord at 38.6%. Rates have been relatively flat across the board. There's probably what you'll see is as buildings get sold or foreclosed upon, these rates will fall further because their capital basis will be lower. They'll be able to price it at a lower rate. So rates are likely to be reduced over time. Some have been a little bit more resilient than others. So downtown Walnut Creek, a little bit better. Alamo, Danville, La Miranda, Pleasant Hill, those have all generally been more resilient. Here's just an example. I just want to give you an example. This was the number of 100,000 square foot options that you had. You had 6 along this corridor in 2019. Now you have 15. So just the amount of scale of available big spaces that are available on the office side has totally changed. And that's why you're seeing Bishop Ranch be one of the places where they're converting towards resi because of that dynamic. But we are seeing, this is a national number, this is leasing activity overall, and it's happening here in the Bay Area as well, and even in the East Bay. We're seeing leasing activity starting to grow. So this is roughly a 5% increase over time. Leasing activity in office space is increasing. I call this the reversion to the mean. Some of us thought that we'd be working in our pajamas forever. That reality is coming back to a little bit of coming to Jesus moment, where in fact have to be in the office and in person, especially as AI grows. So this is one thing that I talk about a lot. There was this expectation that we could all work from our cameras. And now there's a little bit more pressure to be in person. And it's showing up in some other reasons to think about this. So we did a survey, or Fortune, we did a survey, JLL, Fortune 100 companies, and we ask them annually, what's your workplace policy? And I want to caveat this a little bit because Salesforce says their workplace policy is 3 days plus a week. Do they actually come in 3 days a week? No. So the policy and the implementation are two separate dynamics. You just have to keep that in mind. But if you look, in 2022, 30% said fully remote. See that little purple sliver? It's 1%. So massive shift. 56% say hybrid. Now the average days is 3.74. In the Bay Area, it's a little bit more. It's more like 3. But it gives you an idea of just how much that shift over time. And you might have heard recently, I have it on the next slide, yeah. This is the MAD map. And I always bring this up because every year, or actually every week, we get a news article of that a new CEO or somebody comes in, and it's always, we're going to come back in the office more. And so what we've seen is this shift over time. Most notable is like Udemy just had a new CEO. I don't know if you know who Udemy is. They're 3 days a week now. Flexport, 5 days a week. Uber, 3 days a week. So we're seeing it pretty regularly now that the policy has been shifting more towards in-office participation. And those that have unfortunately moved to places like Lake Tahoe are now being forced to come back to the greater Bay Area. So this gives you a scale. And this is really where the company's money meets the, where their mouth meets the money. I forget how to say that, but basically where the rubber hits the road. Yeah, that's right, better. The rubber hits the road. So if you think about it, think about job postings. Like if you aspire to have an employee, what do you aspire that employee to be and where do they want to be? So this is LICAS data and job posting information of office jobs. And what we've seen in general is that they want their employees to be back in the office. So in Silicon Valley, we saw about a 31% rise in in-office job postings year over year versus at 8% remote, which is actually surprising. I'm not surprised that that was positive. So we're seeing a lot more positive job postings in the Valley. Whereas in San Francisco, it's about negative 10% for remote job postings and in office about 8%. And it makes kind of sense, like you don't want to pay San Francisco prices if you're not going to actually have that person in San Francisco. So it's showing up in the numbers in terms of job postings. So this is like the being John Malkovich reality. This is what you don't want to have, and this is what you want to have. That's really the move that we're moving towards. And just in terms of what it means in terms of the market, these are loan defaults or special servicing or delinquencies. And they just continue to rise in the office market over time. We thought that we might see a reprieve and stabilization, but because of the 10-year Treasury, we think actually that this is going to get a little bit worse. The good news is this doesn't seem like a bank crisis because the office sector is roughly 20% of the loans that are expected to come due. And actually the multi-housing sector is relatively strong. So overall, we don't see this as like a major risk just because it's not as big of an exposure as having a bunch of home loans that come due. And where we've seen kind of this shift is it used to be investors were really happy to have office buildings. Investors are not so happy to have office buildings anymore. We've seen it come down about 18%, and now it's gone up about 18% in industrial. So investors are really happy to have industrial buildings and residential buildings, office buildings not so much. And then what are defined as alternatives? And alternatives are generally data centers. It includes single family rentals, student housing, affordable housing. All those things are things that they're generally more interested in. I would caution you on the data center side. I think that those that are planning to have data centers constructed by 2029 are likely to feel something is similar to what life science experienced in 2023 and 2024. Too much inventory coming on too late. All right, so this is separate thing that's happening all at the same time. Let's see if this happens. Oh yeah, okay. So you're probably aware of these. These are the Zeus chariots that are coming into San Francisco. If you drive around, you might see them. They don't have the typical steering wheels. They do seem a little bit space agey. They are coming to San Francisco. So the robots, they are coming, and you can feel it in the city and elsewhere. And we talked a little bit about labor force participation and the slowing down of that. Go to Japan or some other places, and some of the solutions that they talk about are really on the robotic side. So when we talk about labor force participation, I think we have to think a little bit differently. I would note that some people don't realize that the Bay Area has higher concentration of manufacturing jobs than the US overall. Yeah, I don't think people know that. It's roughly 9% compared to the US around 8%. So marginally higher. In fact, it grew over the last decade. So it was, you say it was 8%, now it's 9%. And if you look at it just in California, NorCal grew faster. Probably because of the Tesla plant, but other reasons as well. The other thing to keep in mind, this is something we've done in evaluation because JLL does a lot of site selection. We found that labor force availability of many of these Sunbelt markets for manufacturing jobs really were short. They didn't have the capacity to really accommodate a lot of those manufacturing jobs where those announcements are occurring, especially in Phoenix, Austin, and Savannah. So some of the markets that they were planning to go to, they're not able to hire. And some of the wage expectations that they were assuming that they would be able to get in those markets, they're not able to get. So they're rethinking whether Northern California is an option. And so we're doing an evaluation right now of actually a place in California, in Northern California, where they might land potentially a manufacturer here. But a major problem, to your point, is that the average weight or the average age of a manufacturer is around 44, and that's actually young compared to me, but in general, that's considered aging, and that presents a problem. So we talk a lot about, in the VC space, the idea of increasing the productivity and using technology to get us to a point of advancing robotics and automation in the manufacturing space. So if you look over time, we saw kind of a decline in productivity, which is really what AI and robotics is supposed to be doing. So this is Figure AI. I don't know if you know who Figure AI is, but you can ask Figure AI, the robot, you can say, pick out the fruit, and it'll pick out the fruit and put it in the refrigerator. It has a large language model that's able, with image recognition, to be able to do that. Pretty interesting. It is a little creepy. These are the different ones that are out there. And you know, some of them, the Tesla bot, you can go down to the Stanford Research Park and see those robots. And they're just lined up there, so it does feel a little Terminator. But it does, in fact, the robots do feel like they are coming. And here's what it looks like. So in 2021, we had 6 active leases of the ones that we attracted that were 280,000 square feet. This is 2025, we have 41, 2.4 million. So that's a very short period of time in terms of amount. A lot of that, of course, is in the valley, but we're starting to see it in Hayward and elsewhere. And really, it's the intersection of artificial intelligence and hardware. So this is VC investment in robotics, and then also the vertical of AI. 57% of that robotics investment is also AI investment. So way higher than it used to be. It used to be only 18%, now 57%. So it's really the convergence of the two. And as I think I've shown before, about 1/5 of all AI talent is in the Bay Area. So really concentrated here. And it's not exclusively office space. I think a lot of people think, oh, well, the East Bay doesn't count. The East Bay is not where this stuff goes. It all goes to San Francisco in those shiny offices or in brick and timber buildings in Soma. No, that's not exactly true. It's actually going into flex and lab space. It's in the East Bay, it's roughly around 43% is office. The rest is in other type of uses. So we're seeing it really in a mix of different types of building spaces. So this is just kind of, I want to show you what it looks like. This is 2020, this is only flex R&D space. So we had 14 leases in this space. This is a automated tractor company out there in Livermore. I don't know if you guys know it. And this is 2021, 23, 47, 85, 95 year to date. So it gives you an idea of kind of what's growing in the segment. And really, I think that's an expansion and an opportunity for the East Bay. And then I'll just leave with my big bets. And I think I was 71% last year. I think some of you may have saw them. So we'll see if I'm as good as I was. I got a C, I guess. That's a C. But let's see if I'm as good as I was last year. Maybe I'll get a C+. So first, year-over-year rent growth, 4%. I think that's actually a pretty good bet based on what's happening. Migration will play an important role in that number. $140 billion in U.S. investment, 40% going to the Bay Area. That's a slam dunk. I got that already based on the OpenAI investment. $40 billion in IPO activity. That's hard considering what's happening. We're only at about $10 billion so far. We might not make it based on where we are. AI will lease another 1.1 million square feet in San Francisco. We're at around 450, so I'm probably on pace to do that. Bay Area office vacancy will increase, but then decline. I think we're going to see that. We're going to see office vacancy decrease. Unemployment will increase, yes. So unemployment is likely to increase in leisure and hospitality and retail sector. Professional services likely to see a decrease, as our expectation. But office occupancy will also rise. Bay Area labor force will grow, but population will remain flat because of draconian migration policies. And that's it.
Thank you very much, Quinn. We are going to segue in just a moment to a fireside chat.
So let me start by saying, Quinn, I happen to be in a meeting with Brady Stewart. Some of you might know her name. Probably a lot of you don't, but she is the newer CEO of Bay FC, the women's soccer team. And I made a huge plug for Oakland. I'll just tell you that. She's a San Franciscan, and they've done a lot of data studies, and they were, leaning towards something between San Francisco and San Jose. But I'd like to get you connected with her so you can explain to her just how well positioned the East Bay is to take on a new professional team.
Yeah, there's a void there for sure.
Absolutely. So let's see if she'll be willing to take that call. But let's start with you, Quinn. We know that the so-called Great Reset on loans for commercial properties has been underway. That's the need to get new financing, to perhaps inject equity or even sell assets. And we've seen properties discounted 50% more, and we've seen a lot of this reflected on the presentation today. How long might you expect this to continue to play out? And what kind of policies or reforms, perhaps more reforms than anything else, might help to better manage the ebbs and flows of all of this?
Yeah, so definitely there's pain to be had on the commercial real estate side, specifically in the office sector, less so in multifamily, a little bit of acute pain amongst the industrial sector for those that were new entrants really from 2023 onward. So that's a very small segment. Overall, the industrial sector will be fine. Multifamily sector will be fine. We're talking about mostly life science and office side. And what we saw was there was a term used amongst lenders The term was called Survive to 25. Well, we are here. It is 2025. And now the term we're hearing regularly, you would say, is capitulation. In other words, we have come to the reality that these are the new pricing for office, and we are going to take the loss now. So you're going to see more buildings come to the market at these lower prices. And I always use the San Francisco examples, but there are other examples. There was a building, the Kaiser building in Oakland. It sold for less than $100 a square foot to the Bearing Company. It would have probably sold prior to the pandemic for somewhere around $400 to $500 a square foot. In San Francisco, typical pricing would have been for an office building of a Class A asset around $1,000 a square foot. That same asset is now selling for around $350 a square foot, sometimes less. So what does that mean? It just means that there's just going to be this flow of buildings that are going to be sold and reset. Because of Prop 13, maybe that pain isn't as severe to the assessor rolls as we would think. And I know that in the case of San Francisco, it isn't as severe, but it will mean a meaningful drop overall. I think what we're seeing in certain places is that there's a little bit of a do-si-do that's occurring in the investor world where they're not doing a full resale in places like San Francisco because the property transfer tax is so high that they've chosen to do something that's a little bit of a investor takeover. It's not an official sale. So they don't have to go through the transfer tax process. I think that's messy, and I think also that's an opportunity for cities that don't have that in place. It's just to set that reset is a really healthy thing to do. And to the extent that you don't have these property transfer tax, I think that's a positive thing. The other thing I would say, and I think it's what's happening here in Bishop Ranch, is to allow for residential conversions to occur is a perfectly healthy and good thing for the market. Both offers housing and also strengthens the office market. So to be resistant against office conversions to resi, I think is a bad thing.
How difficult, how realistic is it to do that, to make that type of conversion?
It's exceptionally difficult. We expect in San Francisco, it's about 4% of total supply is eligible for that. I think what we see in places like here is that it's more tear down and rebuild. When we look at projects in Mountain View and elsewhere, almost all of those are going to be tear downs in townhomes. Because that's the most feasible option right now. You're probably aware of this if you're seeing applications. It's not multifamily construction type. It's not type 1 construction. It's mostly for sale townhome construction is the most feasible right now.
Thank you. You know, Abby, I was thinking about some of your comments. I'll hand this over to you, or feel free to pass it back and forth. I'm sorry. Around skills-based hiring, and you know, my wife's family happens to be from Switzerland, and I think about how they do things there. So different than here. I mean, when you're 14, first of all, most people do not get into higher education there. And when you're 14, 15, you're choosing an apprenticeship direction to go in, becoming highly skilled at something. And that's very young. I can say my older daughter's 20 and has no idea what she's going to do. So 14, 15 seems pretty amazing and perhaps a little young. But that being said, that it really resonated with me. So Abby, my question tying into that somewhat is, you've talked about some big plans and the state's leading some of those, including Jobs First economic blueprint and the master plan for higher education in California, the latter of which hasn't been updated for quite some time. What have you learned about the education and workforce development systems in California as you've been developing and updating these plans, and where would you say the greatest opportunity lies?
Sure. And I do want to pick up on youth apprenticeship and the Swiss model, because that really is something to get excited about. But first of all, this was a new master plan for career education rather than the overall higher education. one. But even saying that, I think brings up perhaps not the biggest surprise, but I was surprised at the depth of fragmentation and silos. You know, you've got the UCs, you've got the CSUs, you've got the community colleges. They have different systems, software, and in ways that make it really hard for young people and their families to navigate. So, you know, bringing those together, implementing new technologies such as the e-transcript is hopefully going to make that easier for families. And we don't have enough navigation in the system. I mean, my original graduate work and training was as a school counselor, you know, and we have severe shortages of counselors, of advice available to young people. I'm actually not a fan of pressuring young people or expecting young people to know where they're going when they're in high school. I mean, developmentally, all those young brains need time to develop, to experiment, but what they need in order to do that is hands-on, real-life, work-based learning experiences. And we're a way off of the Swiss model. I think when most people hear apprenticeship, they think of, you know, the building trades, the pipe fitters. You know, the biggest expansion in the state in apprenticeship is what we're calling the non-traditional apprentices in IT, in cybersecurity, in early childhood education, in healthcare, in nursing. But what we lack and really hope to develop is a comprehensive, accessible, universal system for apprenticeship for young people when they're in high school, when they're in college. I mean, given the requirements around registered apprenticeship, it's literally impossible for someone in high school to complete the hours while they're in high school. There's planning and you know, I think some legislation working its way through that would create something new called a high school career bridge that would really enable young people to start their apprenticeship when they're in high school and finish it when they're done. Part of what's exciting about the Swiss and the European system that we have to work towards here is we have to get beyond thinking of college or career and or you know apprenticeship or college because and we have to recognize that over a person's lifetime, you know, they are likely to change jobs every 3 years, likely to have 7 or 8 careers over their lifetime. What we want to build is resiliency, and we want to build opportunities for young people, especially to test themselves in different work-based settings, to see the kinds of settings they like, what excites them. For so many of our young people for whom school has been challenging, young people with learning disabilities, perhaps, you know, being in a work setting can open up new opportunities and new ways of being, and frankly, new role models. But I want to challenge the group here. How many of you have actually taken high school interns or students in your own workplaces? Great, I'm happy to see it. Would like to come back in a few years and see every hand up. You know, there are some barriers in the system that make it hard, but in order to provide these kinds of experiences for young people, we really need partners throughout the business community to stretch and frankly, I think experience the joy of being mentors and helping a young person explore himself or herself and really move forward in their careers and lives.
Yeah, thanks for that answer. And you make a great point in just the general comment around how long people stay within a particular job, within a particular company. I mean, that's just a change that we have to accept. Having been at the bank for 30 years, that's like a thing of the past. You know, when I started at the bank, yes, I actually had hair. So, you know, we just don't see that anymore. It's gone to the wayside. So to you both, and feel free to answer or pass, or you can both answer this, but we know that demographic trends are affecting the economy, and this was touched on again today, how an aging or slow growing population is resulting in a smaller local workforce, the supply pool, et cetera. How big of a concern is it that labor force participation's been dropping. How do you suggest we plan appropriately to face these trends?
Okay, so I brought it up a little bit. I think one of the things to think about is, okay, so what's Japan's birth rate? Does anybody know? 1.26. That is very low. And they're trying to solve it by robotics. There's no migration occurring. That is a recipe for declining economy. For the US, it's 1.66, which is actually not very, obviously that's below the replacement level. You need 2.1, I think, or 2.2. So generally, the way we've resolved that and why we've been more robust than many of these other Western economies like Italy, like Japan, like Singapore, has been that we have been a receiver of talent, and has been that we've been getting that migration to increase our population. Canada is another place that has really been a benefactor of that. To the extent that we decide that we do not want to do that anymore, that will change our economy and slow our economy. And that could be the choice that we take, but that means lower economic growth, means lower productivity, I think, overall. It means things like who take care of us as we get older, our economic governing our tax system would have to shift. So there are a lot of consequences by not allowing for that migration to happen, unless all of us decide that we're going to have a lot more children, which I don't see happening. And I know that the current administration is trying to create financial incentives. You know who's also tried to create financial incentives? Singapore. Hong Kong has tried to do this exact same thing. This is not the first time that countries have tried to incentivize more babies, and it has not materialized. So I just want to caveat that has, in general, not resulted in the effect that they were hoping it would create. What has been the way that you've created positive population gains is through being a gateway market, which is what the Bay Area has been. And the reality is Silicon Valley is 39% foreign born, 39%. San Francisco, 34% foreign born. So 77% of the AI founders are foreign born. 77%. It's a crazy number. So just keep that in mind. If we decide that we're not going to do that anymore, that will have meaningful consequences on the overall productivity of our country, our GDP, our economic growth. And that could be the choice we make, but it's going to mean a very different reality for all of us.
Yeah, couldn't agree more on the imperative of keeping immigration open to build our economy and our productivity, and certainly share concerns about a declining workforce. But I want to look at kind of the glass half full aspect of this as well. I mean, if the laws of supply and demand still apply, there are ways in which this could create opportunities, including wage pressures to increase wages if jobs are scarcer in a tighter labor market, and that could help address the equity divide in California. California has one of the widest gaps in income distribution in the country, where we have the top 10% of earners, those who make an average of $300,000 or more, earn 10 times more than families at the bottom 10% of the scale who scrape by on $29,000. So wage pressure increasing is going to help equity in the state. Also, and I mentioned this in my remarks earlier, I mean, I want to believe that, and have seen in my many long years working in this space, that when employers are more hungry for staff, they're more willing to be open to those people who typically are left behind. Talked about people with disabilities, talked about young people. Older adults are working longer. I mean, we're embarking on what I think could be a really interesting research project with the state's Department of Aging and the AARP Foundation to really dig into patterns of employment among older workers and look at some of the ways in which we can tap the ongoing skills and benefits that older workers can bring to both keep their lives active and enhance their retirement security when they do retire, as well as just keep the labor market more robust.
Thank you both. So with our new administration in place and their position on migration and educational institutions, how does that shift your view on the Bay Area economy?
It shifts it down. I think the reality is that we have to be we have to fear that this is going to have a downward impact on our economy, both in our institutions and in receiving H-1B1 visas within to the Bay Area. So the institutions, I mean, UC Berkeley, Stanford, UCSF doesn't get the same amount of NIH funding. Those institutions maybe don't get as much federal funding and are also potentially defending themselves against the federal administration. So that has a risk. I know for someone who's a professor at Cal, we did not see as many international applicants this year as we did last year. I think that's just because of the overall narrative or language that we're hearing from the administration has created enough fear among some students who have choices not to choose UC Berkeley, which has generally been a receiver of exceptional talent. So that's one item. The other is, of course, the port, the impact of the port in terms of activity. Maybe some of this is lessened by what seems to be a softening stance from the administration as it pertains to tariffs. It is still a 10% increase. It could be as high as 30%. It could be even higher than that. We don't know. All of that means is that we think that there's more of a recessionary impact. And also, I mentioned the migration consequences. All those things we think have recessionary consequences onto the greater Bay Area, and it hits the gateway markets more. So New York, San Francisco Bay Area, Los Angeles, Seattle, San Diego, Houston, Austin, and some of the other markets are more materially impacted.
Yeah, I mean, I share those concerns and fears as a professional, as a person. I'm based in San Francisco. My family's being directly affected. My husband's a UCSF researcher whose funding was pulled. Within UCSF is may have overtaken the city and county of San Francisco as the largest employer in the state. In the city, it's already announced hiring freeze. We can't ignore the multiplier effect of the impact of this kind of direct job loss on all the businesses, moving from Parnassus to Mission Bay, where people drop off their dry cleaning, get their lunch, for broader unemployment. Very concerned about recession. If you heard the governor's May revise announcement yesterday, the state budget is in much worse shape than it was a few months ago, largely affected by the kinds of uncertainty and tariffs and other factors you've been so eloquently describing today, Quinn, and the cushioning that we can provide to periods during unemployment gets threatened during those times, during times like these as well. I think in some qualitative way, creating this climate of fear of putative measures for speaking out. I'm worried, we want to raise our children and our grandchildren to be brave and courageous and to speak out against injustice and authority. And, just, I have so many concerns as a mother and grandmother that, we're creating a climate in which people are going to be afraid to do that.
Appreciate your perspectives on that, and we'll finish this moderated portion on a positive note, and then we'll take some questions. So if you haven't thought of one, I think we're going to have time, Stephen, for a few. Okay, great. But zooming out, what are some of the latest developments and trends that are helping to make you more optimistic about the prospects of the regional economy and labor market?
I have a host. I mean, the reality is that if you look at all the long-term industries that are forecasted to grow over time, we are in them. Life science, clean tech, artificial intelligence, robotics, drones. We're concentrated in all of those segments. So we're in pole position in the highest and fastest growing industry in the world that everybody is pointing to and looking at. The global consciousness is in AI, machine learning. We are that sector. So it is amazing to me that we have to even think about whether we should be optimistic or not. It's so funny that I have to explain to somebody like, oh, how's San Francisco doing? Are you guys surviving? Are you kidding me? We're at 4.5% unemployment rate. GDP levels are still growing significantly. Every indicator that would tell you we are very strong. The inequity issues are a problem, but in terms of economic health, all those indicators, we are still the preeminent leader in the innovation sectors. So as long as we maintain that and we allow for us to continue to grow those segments, we will be just fine. So just continue on that path, allow those sectors to grow and organically expand, we will be fine.
So I certainly share that optimism, but can't leave a conversation on AI without some caution and some concerns about the impact that AI is likely to have on the workforce. We don't know if it's going to be similar to all the other cycles of technological innovation, which actually created more jobs than it destroyed. Some of you may have read or listened to Ross Douthat this morning interview one of the AI researchers who said 2027, that's it, AI is going to take over and all of our jobs will be gone and the question will be universal basic income and how much we can afford. Not sure, hoping that that's on one extreme and incorrect, but what seems to be trending is that the sectors in which AI will have the greatest impact are the white-collar administrative jobs, which creates then another gender dimension, since so many of those jobs in administrative roles, customer service roles, tend to be held by women, who tend to, continue to have disadvantages in the labor market over a lifetime, in ways that periods in and out of the labor market for care of young children, of parents, has an impact on later life learning. So, you asked about optimism. Okay, no, Laurie, let me work on that. I have great faith in resilience, resilience in the Bay Area economy as, widely, distributed and balanced as it is in some of the growth sectors, in the dynamism of the state. I'm not a native Californian. I came here from the Midwest and have just been very proud to see California grow. We could do better in terms of equity, in terms of housing, in terms of so many of our, social issues, but we are now the fourth largest economy in the world. So have faith in the resilience of the Bay Area and the state and of us as humans to really survive and thrive through challenging times.
Well, thank you both so much. Can we get a round of applause for our panelists?
Hi, I'm Yolanda Finchenko. I'm Executive Director of an economic development nonprofit here in the Tri-Valley funded to help science-based startups succeed. And my question, I think, is for you, Deputy Snee, is in terms of the program that you highlighted earlier, there's a lot of outreach for people who have trouble attaining certain educational goals. But I'm curious about many of us are seeing people graduating from college unable to find jobs, and people mid-career and late career in these sectors like life sciences and in tech not being able to find jobs when they lose them as those jobs are constricting. And I'm curious how this program, or if there's another program that taps into that. And then kind of related, if the state is looking at ways to encourage younger companies, so those 6 years and younger that are proven to create jobs at a much faster rate than the sort of cornerstone companies where we're seeing the layoffs.
Yeah, thank you for that question. And let me respond to the second question first, which is exactly what the Jobs First Blueprint is intended to do. You know, certainly on a regional basis to invest in, I think what you're describing as some of those big bet companies who have potential, who need the infusion of capital. Jobs First started as a $600 million investment. You know, given the state's budget over the last couple of years, it was reduced to 400 million. But there's still so much that can be done with those investments that are being pinpointed. And, you know, certainly for the first time in several generations is charting out an economic development blueprint and plan that really originates in the regions. To your first question, and I share your concern so deeply around how much churn there is in the labor market and how confusing it could be, because at the same time we see growth, we are seeing layoffs, you know, within tech, within pharma. And I know that's hitting the East Bay hard. And I think some of the innovations I was mentioning have to do with, you know, K through 12 for young people in the development of the master plan. I was a very loud and nagging voice that we can't just think of, you know, the traditional, although I don't know how traditional it truly is anymore, K through 12 to college path. We have to look at the young people who are disconnected from the system, but we also have to look at working adults, and we have to figure out much more accessible, available, affordable pathways for adults throughout their working lives to move in and out of work and training, and in fact, not to have to make those choices of I'm either going to work or be in school, to keep their skills competitive and keep growing. You know, and frankly, we don't have enough investments in that area. You know, totally share your concern about that, and we have to keep people supported and learning throughout their lifetimes, and also have supports for those periods of transition, because those are going to happen.
For Alexander, again, thanks for great insightful remarks. So if I'm in the advanced manufacturing sector, a company that builds things, what are the acquisition criteria that developers and city planners should be aware of that I'm looking for where I site my company?
Yeah, so there are three main components: people, labor, place, land, or infrastructure, all the components therein, and then permits. And you've only got a few control over of that as, you know, economic development professionals. What we hear regularly is the permitting and speed to market is incredibly important. The red carpet is important. I'll give you an example. As you're probably aware, when Tesla was looking for its Gigafactory, they were looking out in the Central Valley. That's where they wanted to do it originally. They went out to Sparks or out to Reno. Reno gave them a grading permit that day. And it was a very different dynamic. They could do that
in Nevada. They can't do that in the state of California. But speed to market is exceptionally important, especially for some of these clean tech companies. It's something that we really need to work on as a state to enable us to be competitive, because we are losing out, not necessarily because of the labor, not necessarily because of the infrastructure, but really it is the permitting that's holding us back.
Hi, thank you. I wanted to go back to the topic you mentioned, which is the people behind this. So when we aggregate that and talk about the numbers, sometimes we lose the people behind that. And I wanted to elevate the mental health crisis that's going on and the crisis of confidence that many people see. And I'm curious, as you think about the individuals who are experiencing incredible turmoil and the very real crisis that's happening, what we can do to think about building that resilience, those soft skills around critical thinking, taking some of those transferable skills that they have, but also thinking about shoring up the workforce. Thank you.
That's so much to say. I think within our schools, we have to address the behavioral health crisis, some lingering from the pandemic, for kids out of school for too long, for the pressures on families, for just not having enough behavioral health services in this, in the schools. It looks like that's changing. The voters approved Prop 1, which is really creating an infusion of resources for behavioral health throughout the system. As I mentioned, I'm very optimistic about this new role of wellness coaches that can be there in the school, and the intent to hire people with train and hire people with lived experience for those roles. Also, when we talk about training programs, and educational programs, we have to look well beyond what we refer to as the hard skills, knowing how to do Excel or, some of the technical skills. But I have argued that in a 21st century workplace, soft skills really are the hard skills and needed in every job. So all of our training and education programs really have to involve, through work in the classroom and ideally reinforced by learning on the job, all the soft skills of, you're all in workplaces. You know how there's one person, it's not in her job description, and it usually is a she, but it's the person everybody goes to for the questions. It's important for people, young people and adults, to learn how to spot that person and, find their own workplace mentors and develop resiliency in terms of, your supervisor had a hard day. How do you respond? How do you not take that personally? So we have to incorporate that into the training and education programs that we do. And I think, just going back to your point, we really have a crisis in a behavioral health workforce shortage that we have to shore up at every level, from the peer support and paraprofessional to, the MD and nurse practitioner level. And I think some of the investments the state is starting to make are hopefully going to move us faster.
I want to thank you for your talk, and I'd like to know, where in the government can we go to find who's working on the efficiency? And I do want to be very positive. We just secured a permit recently to build 219 freestanding homes. It was absolutely dead in the market a month ago, and we got 2 calls yesterday. So I think that's very exciting. But I've also heard simultaneously that Shorenstein is turning some of his buildings, high rises, into the mortgage companies. And I think the mortgage companies, none of that's announced until they have a buyer. So I'm not sure of how all that market's working. But also, I have 34 units that have been approaching 4 years. They can't decide whether these fit the California requirements of a certain agency. And it's very silly. We won the case, but now they're appealing at HCD. So I'm sure there's some places in the government where they're trying to work out some of the, and I've also spent a lot of time at Stanford yesterday at an energy conference. It was the gridlock. It seems to me that there's gridlock everywhere. Even in Silicon Valley, there's a huge amount of gridlock for starting companies and doing all kinds of things. Where where can I go to find out how I can help some people in the government to do some things? To speed up the systems. It took 18 years to get a permit to build a house that takes 4 months.
I'm stretching outside of my area of expertise and certainly can't speak for the whole administration. I will say that Amy Tong was recently moved from heading up the GovOps agency right into the governor's office to be, not using the Doge term, but really the governor's point person on increasing government efficiency. I heard in his budget talk yesterday, there are a few bills working their way through to ease some of those CEQA requirements. It sounds like you're in contact with HCD. I think that is the entity that is really working on this. And we all want to see more housing built faster with the kinds of environmental and worker protections that are also needed. So I think we're all trying to balance those.
We have
Probably
time
not
for
a very
one more
satisfying answer.
question.
Not necessarily a question, but just a few comments and really a call to action for all of us. As I, sit here, listening to the challenges, a lot of this is not new. It's like a perfect storm that has come. And I'll start off with mental health. Let me back up a minute. My name is Deborah Flores. I'm the Senior Vice President, Area Manager with Kaiser Permanente, and I have an undergrad degree in nursing. So my first exposure to healthcare was in high school and I went through the public school system in New York. We had high schools that could teach you different skills and trades. My brother went to a high school called Automotive High School, wherein he graduated and worked for Lincoln Mercury. I remember it clearly, and I don't know what happened to those kinds of programs. I remember being taught how to be kind, how to speak, how to carry yourself. All of those basics that we find that are lacking, those things were taught. And, it was taught in our home. And the whole thing about mental health, yes, we have to deal with the crisis that we're in right now, but we also better focus on the prevention side. Why are we at the point where we're seeing more alcoholics who are teenagers? Why are we at the point where we're seeing cirrhosis of the liver that we used to see when folks were in their 60s and 70s, and young folks who were in their 30s, et cetera? So I'm encouraged. I don't mean this to be a situation where we feel sad and depressed, but everybody in this room has an opportunity to have an impact on everything that has been talked about today that we need some help with. And the whole thing about aging, I'm proud to say I am 64 years old. And I am so tired of hearing about, let's focus on the millennials, we gotta focus on the millennials. Yes, however, we better focus on the talent that is aging, that is not ready to be led and managed like old school leadership. So we need to train leaders how to lead an aging workforce. And we don't want talent leaving the workforce. For a lot of the things that we need, some of the folks who are around my age group could be having a greater impact because we have more flexibility, we're more brave, we're more bold. And so you need to harness that talent and those skills. So for me, this is a call to action. It's a call to action also for us to age well. That's another pet peeve of mine. I want to age as long as I can. Stop fighting and being upset about aging well. We better get a grasp on that too. So I'm fired up, and I think a lot of people in this room need to be, if you're not, and need to be ready to do something about what's happening. And I'm not running for public office. I'm running for life and wellness and health and a better society for all of us.
Yeah, thank you so much. That's a fantastic way to end it. I'm feeling fired up now, so you got me rolling. Quinn and Abby, thank you so much for the insights today, your time on the panel. That was really fantastic. We appreciate your time here. And with that, I will ask for one more round of applause and hand it over to Steve.
All right. Let's give it up one more time for our great panel. I know that you all stuck around because of them, but I also know that some of you stuck around because you're hoping to maybe fly somewhere in a little bit. So we do have our friends from Southwest Airlines in the house this morning. Pete Pascalis, I see him right here. I believe Lillian Santos Stables is here somewhere as well, so we'd love to have both of you come up if you'd like, or at least Pete. please come on up because we're going to announce our Southwest Airlines ticket winners as we hear a couple things about what's been happening with Southwest and OAK. Y'all should be excited about this. Let's give them a round of applause. All right.
Thank you so much for having us today. We're super proud sponsor of this event. Quinn, Abby, your insights are really helpful and helps us go back to our team back in Dallas and kind of give some insights of what's going on in the East Bay. Right now for Southwest, we are currently running a $39 special. This $39 special runs for the next week. Hopefully you can take advantage of that. And we've also released our schedule. Our schedule is good through the end of January 2026. So we're excited about that as well too. But I know you guys don't really want to hear about that. You want to did I win the tickets? That's what you really want to know, is did I win the tickets? So, so we did do a drawing and
City of Pleasant Hill, Eaton. Eaton? It's your day, Eaton. This was meant for you. Congratulations, City of Pleasant Hill, Eaton. And this is why you stay to the end at East Bay EDA events. It's so worth it. Like 2 tickets, Southwest Airlines. Take a friend, take patience. I'm available. So, Stephen, let you close.
Thank you all very, very much. We've had a great morning. Let's give it up one more time for our sponsors. John Muir Health, City of San Ramon, Bank of America. Let's also give it up for our wonderful panelists this morning, Deputy Secretary of State, Alexander Quinn, and thanks Daniel Shulman for the moderating. You all are wonderful. We appreciate you being here. Please enjoy whatever food and refreshments may be remaining. And thank you for being here at our 2025 Economic Outlook. We'll see you again soon.